Welcome to Carl D's Desk Sessions number 6. Um, Boy, I love that. I love that. In all the elocution, speech, debate, theater, monologues, voice and speech, Shakespeare, um, you'd think you wouldn't start a sentence with "a," but alas, that is how we speak sometimes. I was listening to a podcast, and the cat was going, like he had a long S and he almost had an R in there. And then you have the British who do the or anyway, it's funny when you write dialogue how people phoneticize. Is that the word? How they phoneticize it's usually UH, but you see sometimes ERM, ERM. You see sometimes that's about it, or which I don't think anyone ever says but I think those are interpretive in terms of how you're going to come across as an actor. When you speak a casual cadence or a conversational cadence, and that is a tricky thing with a one-man show, or I guess with stand-up. I don't know about most, but many stand-ups don't write speeches. I don't know. I think it's probably, let's just say it's 50-50. Some write the stuff down word for word, because the word is the thing, the timing of the word, the specificity of the word is the thing. And then they have to learn it and say it precisely. And then there are the extemporaneous comedians who riff, come up with bits, they run it. And eventually, I think you get to the same place of where you usually say the bit the same exact way because you've figured out where things lie. But if I'm staying on task with the desk sessions as I see it, I might have to veer off the path of strictly speaking about what's going on with my one-man show, which I will reveal so far today is renamed again. We Carry the Light. That is the title so far. Or Carrying the Light, but I think the carrying is a multisyllabic and not as catchy, so we're going with We Carry the Light. And I am aware, which I wasn't when I bought the domain, I am aware of a similar title, and I am not going to belabor it or worry about it. I think I've been procrastinating and feeling productive in workshopping the title. That may or may not change. It just so happens that when I wrote a play and produced it in New York, knee deep, about a football player who hurt his knee his senior year, knee deep in troubles in his life after losing football. Knee deep was the title. There wasn't much debate. I didn't have to think about it. This one I might, because a one-man show has many themes and it hasn't yet been put on its feet. But if I have an unproductive week and I want to stay productive in this format, which is the vlog, and not that I've ever had an unproductive week so far. Every week I am writing, every week I am tweaking, and every week I am practically hugging the binder to my chest to see if I can just put some mojo, some momentum, some kind of energy field onto this thing, and make it so that it's part of my life until I have to put it to bed or raise it up. You know what I mean? We're raising a barn, and I'm just not there yet with the Amish and the lemonade pitchers and the barn raising. I can't call the village in yet to put the beams up, but I am doing the blueprint. And I think that's all it really will be, right? Is a blueprint, because it has to be put into physical space. That's the crazy thing about theater and film, but theater, because it doesn't live anywhere else, is literally a spatial thing. There's going to be things that will have to be cut because the door you imagined is on the left, stage left, not on stage right, or whatever it might be. You're gonna have to make some modifications. And isn't that life? And I think that's why I was attracted to it in the first place, theater. And talking to people this week, um, and one of the themes in the show is being adrift and then being found and then coming home. And we talk these days a lot about where the home is, where the family lies, where is your nurture coming from. And in many ways, while I was raised idyllically in suburbia, and in a pre-internet era, and in a feral kind of suburban bike riding, just ideal riding bikes and living on the street till the lights came on cliche. I lived that life, and I was fortunate enough to have New York across the river. So my school trips were to the Museum of Natural History, the Bronx Zoo. We got to, once I became a little more autonomous, I could get on a bus and I could go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I could go to Washington Square Park. I could watch jugglers and acrobats, and I could actually get myself a Foster's oil can, 24-ounce beer can at a bodega underage, because they didn't give a shit back in the 80s. And I remember just sitting there watching street performers and just being, it was the first time I remember being alone for alone's sake. It was just the thing that was hard to do when you were always rolling with your posse of kids and friends and teams, and you were just always kind of in class or in groups. And I do remember vividly one day taking that trip by myself. I don't know what that impulse was. And I remember guessing at what train to take. I just knew I needed to go downtown, and I guessed, and I kind of used a few previous trips with friends to get myself to Washington Square Park. And I just sat there and got a free show. And when the bucket passed, I looked the other way. But this was probably simultaneous, or maybe dovetailing into when I got into doing theater and then declaring myself an artist and being really pretentious in high school. But it is a theme in the show where I talk about how I wished for a bond with siblings that were too much older than me to really be a ragtag group of rascals. And I found that, I guess, in the theater. And the cool thing about the theater versus a team, although I did play team sports, which actually I think helped me in the theater because I understood the collective goal thing. But the theater is co-ed, and there's a design purpose to present the show. So I really blossomed in the theater in more ways than I can count. And oddly enough, getting confidence there translated to the basketball court. It translated to romance. It expanded my options. It expanded my thinking. I had the good fortune of getting a chance to study in Oberlin, Ohio one summer. And I talk about it in the book, but I I don't know if my reading comprehension was low, or I had some kind of ADD, or some kind of, I just couldn't focus, and I just couldn't read Shakespeare. Who can, right? And at this Oberlin Theater Institute, I was the youngest student there. I got blessed with a scholarship, and they had Royal Shakespeare Company actors. It was Patrick Stewart before he was Captain Picard. It was like the summer before he became Captain Picard. I got to study with this dude and an actress named Lisa Harrow, who was also a Royal Shakespeare actress. And it was the first time that the stuff made any sense to me. And So when I think of theater, I think of the expansiveness, or and film, television, but the expansiveness of it. The fact that I went from almost feeling as if I were learning deficient cognitively to being able to make sense and speak words of Shakespeare. And um, that's an amazing feeling because, those words are, there's a notion, I think, sometimes that English isn't as beautiful as French or as passionate as Spanish or Italian. But man, I think Shakespeare makes a claim that English is a beautiful, beautiful language. And so, that's what you're dealing with there. And I don't really talk about this in the show, so I'm definitely off on a tangent. But the the experience of being away from home in my, I hate the word tribe because of what it means now. Tribal, people are tribal. I don't know. Is that true? That's what they say. They say we're tribal. I guess we were at one time, but I think, I don't know. I think you probably have it's how you're raised, right? Were you raised urban, suburban, or rural, right? And I guess ideologically, I understand the tribe. And when I think of the word tribe, I also think of people in the theater. Because at first, I was the normal cat. I was the jockey guy that didn't really belong in the theater because of a crossover appeal I had where I was mainstream jockey, known as a athlete and a kind of bright kid. And then the theater kids weren't, when I was exposed to older theater kids, they were odd and individualistic, and God bless them, they scared the crap out of me at the beginning because I was like, does anybody want to go shoot hoops? And they were like, I'm not feeling what you're saying there. And so I had to kind of get over the shyness I had, but also the stranger in a strange land feeling. And then, of course, with any bonding, with any summertime thing, be it camp, be it any immersive experience, you bond so quickly and fall in love with a, a group of people with a shared thing. And that's what the theater meant to me. And so that's what I'm hoping. Not that I talk about this, I talk about some real life stuff and struggles in the show, but I do have a feeling of trying to get back to that um, uh, place of coming home. And I may have been naive and young, and certainly I've shed a lot of naivete, but naivety, whatever the fuck. I've shed a lot of my naive thinking, and but I've preserved enough of it, thank God. And the times I've had my heart broken in the notion that once I became quote unquote an artist, without all the pretentious bullshit, but once I said I was an artist, I thought that that was the superseding categorization for me. Meaning, are you an artist too? Yes. Awesome. We got a lot in common. And I thought it superseded race, class, all of that stuff. And for those utopian moments in certain black box theaters or rehearsal rooms, um, and summers before you had to pay your own bills, that was true. And then the real world does infringe and identities emerge. And now I think identities are um, swung like a club. And, I am mainstream white American. So that is, I just don't want to play those games. So I hope my play can be a Gen X cat. I had another notion for a title was a non-toxic man of a certain age, but there was a show called Men of a Certain Age on TBS. I think it was Ray Romano and Andre Brower. Um, Scott Bakula. It didn't last, but it was the idea that guess what? There are versions of non-toxic men out there. My dad being one of them, my brothers, I think, and myself. So maybe that's a thing. It will be a byproduct of if I can get this play to the marketplace, and if it resonates anyway somehow, we can sort of push back. And I think that we lose that in the rhetoric and in the despair, because there's enough to despair about these days. But there's always the pushback, and there's always people who recognize the shitty shit and refuse to capitulate. And so I don't know. Is that what an artist does? I don't know. I think it's probably very impractical to be sitting in front of my desk and talking shit. And I hope this doesn't stray too far into the kind of stuff I avoid, because I'd like art for art's sake. I'd like to tell stories for uh, story's sake, and go back to that unifying notion that people are people, um, and somehow find universal stories. It's going to be hard to have a universal story where there's one dude from Jersey up there talking shit, but somehow it works. Somehow, if you really dig deep enough, and I hope I'm digging deep enough, that's really what it comes down to. If you dig deep enough, it is either going to resonate because it's similar experience, or it's going to resonate because it's unique to people who've never been exposed, i.e. Shakespeare. Like, what the fuck do I have in common with Prospero in The Tempest? There was a moment when Patrick Stewart was doing Prospero, and there is an epilogue or like a monologue direct to the audience, and he's so good and so clear and so masterful over this language that you're understanding. And he got an applause break because I forget, I could look it up now, but the line was in Shakespearean tongue, but it was he said, "And if you would raise your hands now," and the audience just knew in this highfalutin language, oh, the play's wrapping up. Homie's asking for a fucking round of applause. He deserved it. He got it. And it made perfect sense. And, I got a vibe on that. And I think everybody would. So I guess we just need open minds, open ears, open hearts to take stuff in. And hopefully, uh, with this contraction and this changing of the guard, hopefully for the better, we can get back to finding ways to be vivid and specific and nichey, because nothing's more exciting than going into an enclave that you've never been in. And that was the rule in comedy: was specific is funny, general is boring. And I think that applies to everything. And I hope we can get back to it. And you know, as I continue to ramble, and I'm really just trying to edify my thoughts and my purpose and get back into what they. There's just so much information and so many swirling ideas about creativity. But if you can tap into, there's a reason I gotta. What is the reason I gotta? There's a reason I gotta do this. And I guess that's finding the purpose of it. And that was always my hope with art. And the maturing process I had was, rather than it being a place to find validation and acceptance and love, which in many cases, the love is fleeting, and you have to find, it can't mean that much to you. It's a dual purpose. It's very hard to finally understand. Sure, you want love. You want to put love out there, and it's important. And yet at the same time, you have to have the perspective that it's not as important as heart surgery, as feeding people in hurricane zones, or you're not curing cancer. So you have to go for it like it's your life depended on it, but also know that your life doesn't depend on it. And then I think that's where the freedom to really just sort of give. And that's been a hard thing for me to understand. It was about getting attention for a long time for me. Give me attention, please give me attention, please give me attention. And now it's about, let me give something that I've been keeping secret for a long time, or let me give something that inspired me. Let me pass a torch, pass the baton. Let me carry the light and hand the light off. And some motorbike just throttled. So I think that's a cue. And I guess this is the first time I didn't belabor the truth of the story of the one-man show, other than tell you that we carry the light. And I know I know somebody else has a similar title, but I've been told that, don't shy from that. There are a lot of point blanks. There are a lot of thunder roads. There are a lot of eyes in the skies. Um, and what are you going to do? There's, I hope we haven't even approached the limit of infinite language and infinite possibilities of language. There's a movie that I liked a lot called Flash of Genius, and it's about a dude who invented a blinking windshield, and General Motors stole his idea, and he sued General Motors and bankrupted his life and his family. But he was right that they stole his idea, which was at one point this blinking alternating windshield that was a genius idea. And the defense, the GM defense, said it's just all circuits, and it's all circuits in a different order. So it's not patentable. How can you patent a different sequence of circuits or whatever, if I knew what he was talking about technically? And to defend himself, the plaintiff, played by Greg Kinnear, sent someone to the bookstore to come back with A Tale of Two Cities. And he entered it into evidence, and he handed the book to the person who said that all he did was rearrange the circuits. And he made the guy read the opening line of A Tale of Two Cities, and he said, this is a book by Charles Dickens. Can you read me the first line? And the first line famously is, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Or it was the worst of times, it was the best. It was, no, I'm not even sure. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We'll go with that. If it's in reverse, sue me. But it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So he had the guy read that famous opening line of a book. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And the dude, played by Greg Kinnear, said, did Charles Dickens invent the word it? Guy says no. Did he invent the word was? No. And he brings it all the way through painstakingly. So he didn't invent those words, but he did put them in a magnificent order. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And if you started your book with that, you would be a plagiarist. And that's how he kind of won his case, because the circuits he put in this order made this thing do something mechanically. And that was the flash of genius, the thing that he knew was unique. And he won his case. And then I guess the real art part of it, the storytelling part, is, was it worth it? Was it worth it to be right and to have your family go down the tubes? And that's where art for me steps in, because you could read the transcripts. I don't know if that's lifted from the court. I doubt it, because you have to do things in storytelling that truncate or make it approachable. That's why movies and stuff about writing, you seeing this, it takes me forever to type. So you don't want to see this typing, saying, So anyway, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Words put together in different orders can be a complete flip-flop of meaning. And if it's similar, I'm Knee Deep was the name of my play, Born to Run. Then there's Born in the USA, Born to Be Wild. similar, right? Mine is we carry the light. And I like that I am now in the light, studio, artificial light. I'm going to get out into the natural light and I'm going to try to stay in the light. So thank you. This was a little off topic desk session today, but I don't know. I'm vibing. And like I said, if I said anything controversial, it's very unlikely to see too many eyeballs. So if you're a couple of the eyeballs that ever made it to the end of one of these, thanks. And I'm going to keep them coming for my own sake. And I'm just going to try to share. So desk session 6. I'll see you. Thanks. Peace.